How many people here are Star Trek fans? All right, that's a good number. Good, and I think you'll like this. How many people have actually seen the short that came out a few weeks ago that was produced by us, Unification? Okay, not everyone, so we're going to play it, we're going to show it. And I figured before we get to that, I wanted to give a little bit of background about my company, OTOY. For those in the visual effects business, or even in the production business, you might know us from our tools and technology. We create Octane Render. We have also been operating, and we took Lightstage out of USC and ICT and turned that into a full service operation. We've been doing that for about 15 years. And so our technology and our software is designed to help artists, and we want to build pipelines and tools and workflows that are designed for the future. And of course, there's a lot of emerging endpoints like the Vision Pro, holographic displays that are being created by partners at Lightfield Lab and others. But the reason why I guess I'm here today is to talk about the content. We also do content really to dog food our own future pipelines, future tools, and also in certain cases because we love creating things as artists ourselves. And one of my closest friends, his father, created Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry. Rod Roddenberry, my friend, has been my brother for 40 years. He invested in OTOY long ago. That endowment helped start what we call the Roddenberry Archive. And the purpose of the Roddenberry Archive started initially, even separate from OTOY. It was designed to just scan in the millions of documents, all the different things that Gene had written over the years. And as we were thinking about how to leverage this endowment, it became clear that OTOY's role could be in creating 3D files and creating 3D replicas of everything. The production assets, the in-universe assets. And so documenting and archiving the world of Star Trek became something that is one of the largest projects actually at our company, and it's something that has gotten just a lot of wonderful attention. Really, we announced this in its entirety really in 21. It was the 100th. It was Gene's centennial. He passed in 91, and right after that, Apple put us in the keynote. They showed the work they were doing. And we started with the idea of, let's just take the original Enterprise, the one from the movies, and also, of course, that was a refit of the one from the TV show, and just build it life-size. There were a lot of ideas. Even in the 90s, I think there was the prospect of having an entire Enterprise, life-size Enterprise hotel. It would have cost $150 million. Paramount didn't make it happen, but just the notion of a virtual digital double of the Enterprise that is actually in that universe, that all the episodes play out, all the movies play out, that was what sort of compelled us to sort of go down the path of building the sets and all those things. And of course, with what we've done, we can bring these into a volume, we can film on it, we can do all sorts of things. But the other part of the archive that is interesting is where do you start from the Star Trek story? And in our case, of course, there's a history to this. We've built, if you look through the history of Star Trek or even the Enterprise Bridge, it just changes over time. And we've built all those sets. And those sets are created in various tools. Octane is our renderer, but we can also render it in Unreal. And you can go to roddenberry.x.io today, and you can have these experiences in a browser. It streams from the cloud. And that's our other part of our technology platform is we deliver these live streams and render these, and all of those things are part of our stack. But in terms of the amount of levels of detail that go into the work in the Roddenberry Archive, you can see here these props are created by our hard surface modelers. We also do scanning, so we scan everything we can that is original. But in the end, those things become production assets that you can explore for how they were used in the production. But if you're going to explore the Enterprise Bridge and see Kirk's room and do all those things, we do build that in-universe version with everything working. And the history of Star Trek, it's 60 years, right? So there's just so many shows and so many, 800 hours of content. And even the Enterprise, there's 14 different versions. Many are familiar probably with the J.J. Abrams one, which we have here. There's new iterations with Discovery and Strange New Worlds. On the right, you're seeing two designs for, the first one was from '64. That was the original design of the Enterprise Bridge. We built that in 3D. And below, before they made Star Trek the Motion Picture, they were going to do a TV show in the '70s. And we built all those things. So those things are all in the archive. You can see here, this is the web portal that you will see if you go online. We have a Vision Pro app. And the portal is more than just the ships and the stories. It has everything from the planets to the props. When we launched it, it got a lot of great attention. I mean, people really loved it. And we always were, we wanted to be like a Smithsonian or the equivalent of what the Smithsonian did, which is preserving, they preserved the 11-foot physical model. We wanted to do that digitally. And in full circle, the Smithsonian covered us when we launched the archive and the portal. But all the things that I just showed you are sort of the base layer of how we got to where we are today. When we started to do documentary interviews, Mike and Lisa Kudo, who are literally the creators of the Star Trek Encyclopedia, they've been working on Star Trek for decades. They've almost created the visual design language for so much of it. They really helped us craft another two pieces of the archive. And one of those was, let's interview everybody that we can, the actors, the directors, going all the way back to the first pilot, The Cage, which was filmed in '64, so 60 years ago, almost this month. And we interviewed the director, Robert Butler. And as we were doing that, we thought, well, why don't we start by recreating, bringing in, an actor and actresses to play the characters, put this on a volume and actually interview the director of The Cage and show him those sets being recreated. And that's what you're seeing here. And from that, at the same time, this was back in '22, we decided, why don't we do a quick 20-second concept video where we'll take those assets, and instead of just making them part of the documentary, we'll tell a narrative, and we'll do it from the perspective of one of the characters from that first pilot, which is Yemen Cold, which you see here in this montage. And she's played by my wife, Mai Taisu, who's here in the audience. But I'll play this first clip. This is 20 seconds, and it was our first foray into any sort of Star Trek-like video content. And here it is. People liked it when it came out. We didn't know. We put it in there as another addendum to the documentary pieces. And if you're a fan of Star Trek, and many people have loved things outside the TV shows and the movies, you'll see that the scenes you're seeing are from not just the TV show, not just from The Cage, but the extended stories around those episodes. From the comics, Marvel did a bunch of comic books in the '90s, which continues the story from The Cage. A lot of that has been adapted into Strange New Worlds. But we just took those things. We took the novels. We took everything. I mean, the goal of the archive is every aspect of Star Trek. 40% of the stories of Star Trek are from the literary universe, and you can see here we've been building all that. And that was 22. 23, things got a little bit more interesting. We were brought onto the, actually a bunch of our team members were brought onto the Star Trek Picard Season 3 production. They built the Enterprise D bridge, Picard's bridge from the '90s, from actually '87. And so we did another short. We did a whole bunch of interactive pieces where you could explore, the next generation bridges, even the stuff that you'd see on Picard, like the Enterprise F and G, which were introduced in the very last few episodes. So we did another short. This one was 2 minutes, and we did one in between, which, for the interest of time, I won't show. But that short got 2 million views, and people went crazy. And I'll play that one for you next. This one's 765874, Regeneration, and I'll launch that next. So for those who might not be familiar, thank you for the story of Star Trek. Thank you. We love making this one. This was came together really nicely, and we timed it to come out right after the very last episode of Star Trek Picard Season 3, where you find out that Picard's beloved ship, which crashed. So the 1994 movie Star Trek Generations, the Enterprise that you just saw in this piece, crashes on the planet. It gets ruined. You think it's gone, and Picard gets a new Enterprise, in fact, in the next film. And Kirk dies. Captain Kirk dies. Him and Picard fight Malcolm McDowell, and Kirk falls off a bridge and gets buried under. Picard buries him under makes a makeshift grave and puts his badge on there. In the novels that William Shatner wrote, where he wants to bring Kirk back, Spock goes to that gravesite for his friend and picks up that badge. In the comics, same thing, almost exactly as we depicted it. And it was beautiful because I feel like this was pulling together many different layers of Star Trek history. It was also contemporaneous with things that were happening in the current Star Trek. It wasn't just a look back at the past. And so that gave us sort of the impetus to then think, well, where are things going next? And obviously Picard ended. A lot of the Star Trek shows now are either focused sort of in the very early days of Star Trek before Kirk was captain or long after. But as the 30th anniversary of that movie came around this year, it was clear that we sort of had an opportunity to do something much more ambitious than anything we had done before. And this time, we went to Paramount, and we became an official licensee, mainly also to bring the archive itself as an app that was potentially commercializable to the Vision Pro and to get Paramount's help and support. And they helped us connect to Bill Shatner, who we had previously interviewed for the documentary pieces the year before, and the Nimoy Estate. And that led to the piece that I'll show you next, which is Unification. And this one is 10 minutes long. And we spent a good part of this year filming it. We pushed a lot of frontier technologies, which you'll see at this piece. And I'm very proud of it. I think, it's only been 3 weeks since it's been out. It's been a blur. But it's 4.4 million views. The video is actually unlisted because you're supposed to watch it inside of the website or in the Vision Pro app. But people found the link and it went viral. And I will say that if you look at the comments, I was really emotional reading them because a lot of people loved it. I'm going to play, and then I'll show you how we made it, and also some of the other layers that are sort of been happening around this production. So I'm going to play this next, and I'll join you when it's done. Let's roll it.
There are always possibilities, Spock said. And if Genesis is indeed life from death, I must return to this place again.
Thank you. I'm very proud of this work, and I apologize for the judder, but I think that I think hopefully the emotion and the intent and everything that we were going for came through. So this is a very unique piece, even among shorts and even among productions that are out there, in the sense of, it's not a TV or a movie. It is something that was done in coordination with the studio. But also, obviously, we're bringing back two characters. And for those that may not be familiar, Captain Kirk dies in 1994, Star Trek Generation. Spock dies off screen in Star Trek Beyond. Leonard passed away right before they're doing that in 2015, and the 2016 movie just references that Spock dies. And at the very end of that film, Zachary Quinto's Spock, the younger Spock, gets this gold box, the same one you see on, in this piece. And that place is where this takes place, as happening right before Spock dies. So the idea is we're showing Spock and Kirk as they were last seen at the ages they were on screen, reunited. There's a lot of Star Trek lore that it is in this that explains and makes that viable, and people have been deconstructing it, but have largely pieced it together. But I think most people just see this and they know those characters, or they feel the emotions in there. And I have to credit Carlos, the director. He did an amazing job. And Sam Witwer plays Kirk. Lawrence Selig plays Spock. My taste, of course, Colt. And Robin Curtis came back. She played Savik, the Vulcan crew member of the Enterprise from Star Trek 3 and 4. And she had in the original script, she had a child with Spock. That's why she was left behind in Vulcan in Star Trek 4, and that was the character behind her in our piece. We actually had the very good fortune of premiering this piece with Bill Shatner. He does these events twice a year where he brings a certain number of people onto the official Star Trek set tour in New York. And that was our premiere. And I'll get into his role in this and all the different things that we went through to get here. But he hadn't really seen the finished piece, and he hadn't seen much of Sam portraying, younger Kirk since, April or May. So he had only really seen this for the first time in its completion and in its final form, pretty much at the same time as everyone else. And that's Lawrence Selig, Spock, who's there, and we have 4 of our 5 major cast members there, and so we watched it. He watched this with dozens of fans and us, in the day that it launched. And I'm going to play a video that was shared with me by Lawrence, who's filming this right after the the short ended. And I think what's important to understand about why this happened is that we had been had Bill interview for the archive the year before, and the very last minute of that interview is what I'll share with you next. This is not from the finished piece, but it's the 1 minute that was the last thing we shot, and it was what put this idea in my head to do this piece. I'll play that for you next.
We were brothers, and I loved.
He's talking about Leonard.
And a few months before he died, I don't know, something happened, and I don't know what it is. And I've been assured by both of his children that he loved me, but he stopped talking to me. And I couldn't break through. And towards the end, I was told he was dying. I wrote him a letter saying how much I loved him and how I regret not seeing him. And he died. And I don't know to this day. I'm told stories by people who said to me, that happened to me. And it was because of the illness. And their minds, they weren't thinking exactly the same way. So I'd like to think that was it. That as he got further and further along with his emphysema, that it wasn't something I did because I loved him.
Yeah, and as that interview wrapped with that last piece, which is in the full interview and is now out with this short that you just saw, it did sort of make me feel like, a lot of people had approached Bill about doing Kirk or coming back as Kirk or doing it, DH Kirk. And I think he just felt that none of these stories were doing justice. I mean, he turned down being in the 2009 movie with Leonard for JJ because, again, it wasn't the right fit for bringing Kirk back. And I guess this piece, because it wasn't something he did, he was reluctant to do it. And in the end, I think he felt, no, this could be beautiful. And part of the the whole agreement between all the parties, including the Nimoys and Bill and Paramount, was dialogue to a minimum. And it was really only in the middle of production that Bill agreed, let's use my voice for the scene in the tunnel, right? It's his line from Star Trek II, and have that be the only words you hear during the whole piece. Not many silent pieces come out these days, but I think for what we were doing here, I think it worked. And it was a choice we made artistically. You'll see that we can make everyone talk. And I want to show the behind the scenes. I want to show how this technology works, how we developed it as we were filming this. Obviously, you saw in the earlier piece, we had a few seconds of Spock, Lawrence Selleck playing him. You can see on the right, that's Sam Witwer. He's a veteran actor. I've watched him, for 25 years. He's been in Star Trek, and he's been in Battlestar Galactica, and he's the voice of Darth Maul. Tremendous actor. He really threw himself into the role of Kirk, as did Larry and May and everyone else. But you can see here, that's him without the digital mask. And it is a digital mask. We've been doing digital faces for 15 years, light stage scanning. We used to have to put dots on people's faces, and it used to be a lot more complicated before machine learning made this thing much more automated. But we do sculpt 3D prosthetics that can be physically printed. In fact, when we did our first test with Larry and Spock, all physical. We moved to digital partly, and now we're doing all digital for the most part on at least the majority of the facial structures.
I think I was 26, 27 when I came in. How do you account for that? The age, and am I still recognizable? How would you do that?
These are all real time, by the way.
I mean, science fiction's filled with magic. So you could do it because we live in science fiction.
So those are the very first tests we did of Larry and Sam, and prepared some of these for Bill. And one of the things we did is we weren't sure which direction we're going to go. And we let Bill decide. This was his guidance on this project. Because when he first announced that he was working with us, and it did get a bit of news in May, he said, OTOY can de-age me. I can be 50 years younger. And in fact, for this piece, you have a 60-year-old Kirk. He's 93 or 4 now, almost. He's going to be 94 soon. We did de-age him, and without Sam, the actor, being an intermediary.
How would you do that? I mean, science fiction's filled with magic. So you could do it. Science fiction offers an imaginative look at what could happen.
And he saw that, he loved it, but he's like, if you can get, and then I showed him Sam's performance, right? And he said, if you can get me on set, and I don't have to be there physically, and you have an actor that can pull this off, I will back him. And in fact, they follow each other on Twitter, and so there was a connection already there. And before I even showed him that, I was scared. I did do tests for Picard Season 2. This wasn't used, but this is showing us doing the same with Patrick Stewart. And obviously, de-aging actors with this tech, with what we call digital prosthetics, there is a model that's built, it's applied, but it is nearly real time, and it's really computationally not that expensive. What I'll be showing you when it runs in real time is running on a laptop on this set, and we could probably run it on an iPad, and of course we can run it on the cloud, and there's different qualities. There's final quality rendering, there's real time, and it's just a suite of technology. So if you're de-aging somebody, it's one thing. If you're bringing somebody completely back,
keep us that down in 6 months. We've done our bit.
That's Sam, by the way, doing this 60-year-old Shatner for Bill. And when Bill saw that, he's like, that's great. That's as good as you de-aging me. So let's go with that. And we did do tests, and we started with Bill's interview as our basis for figuring out where to go before we went into production. But when we were in production, this is how the tech works. This is me filming an Asus laptop with my phone, and that's Sam testing the digital prosthetic on his face. And of course, there's a bodysuit and everything. There's a lot of prosthetics that went into this physically, right? It's not just digital. And to make that point clear, when we were doing this early Spock makeup and prosthetics, Yeah, I mean, for Larry, for Lawrence, we built an entire physical prosthetic, and we had a great-looking Spock that had no digital. It was all makeup and prosthetics. It just was really hard to act in. And it also didn't look amazing when you were really close to the eyes. So that's why we started to test a mixture of that with digital. This is all running real time and live. This is from 22. Some of the tests that we were doing then, and that gave us a pretty good sense as to where we wanted to stop short with the physical prosthetics and go digital for the performance. And as we were filming these things, we also would capture them in you call it 4D capture. We have a body scanner for light stage, so we can take certain shots and relight them. This is that mind melt scene between Colt and Spock. And those, as you'll see in some of the shots in this production, we actually went, when we shot at Huntington Gardens, which was the location for that garden scene, we scanned everything, and we can render it. Now, we can also, of course, keep things in camera, but we had the option of doing both. And as for the 3D digital sculpture that we use for the face mask, we can also, we can pop it into Unreal, we can relight it on the set, and it can be applied in many different ways. And I think that's something that we've been developing this over a few years as we've been doing these shorts, and it's getting better and better all the time. And I think that even the one thing that we found that's been interesting is we have great actors that have almost grown up with this. So Larry's been playing Spock now for 2.5 years. Sam has been practicing to play Kirk for 2 years. So we've been writing the code. We have a team in-house that's been building this, these face rendering pieces off of our light stage work. And the actors have almost been learning to drive them, and that feedback loop has been really, really valuable. Of course, you can see here we're also using a volume. This is from the last piece before the unification. But I really dislike people also referring to anything like this as deepfakes, because there is a 3D model. There's even physical models that get scanned in. There's a ton of work that gets into it. And there's also, when things don't look great in the final frame, there's a ton of rotoscoping. There's a lot of digital work that, that all those artists on set that do that are a big part of it. But machine learning has changed things. I mean, we can apply a 3D face live, and we can even do that with makeup. And that's becoming, that's a really potent solution for productions. And I want to share a little bit about just the overall behind the scenes beyond just these parts of the production pipeline. For those that are following the story, there's a lot of references. These are all the different references that you can look up in Star Trek history to explain where the pieces of the short came from. Kirk's body was buried in Days from Station. Saw that in Picard Season 3. We brought that back for a bit. The very beginning is Gary Mitchell, Kirk's best friend from the second pilot, played by Gary Lockwood, who did come back and do a performance capture for us. And he's 87 now. We made him as he looked in 65. And there is a mixture of CG and performance capture there. When it came to doing the garden scenes, and even we did do a full physical bodysuit and prosthetic for the character that gives Kirk his badge back. And of course we filmed it at Huntington. But you can see here we also did a Gaussian spot capture, and we also scanned in the prosthetic so that we'd have a perfect 3D render of it. And in a couple of shots in the piece, it is CG. And it's not just the character, it's the entire Huntington Garden area, this giant area that we basically did LiDAR photogrammetry scanning so that we'd have that in addition to what we photographed. And of course, that whole park, the Huntington, is just a small piece of a much larger environment that we had been building. I wanted it to look like Paradise, to look like Mackinac Island, actually. And we had an amazing artist, Aaron Westwood, that built it in Cinema 4D, World Creator, and Octane. And as we were mapping out some of the shots, that first shot where you're seeing, almost boots or sky to the boots, right? This environment this is running on one GPU, but the detail in there, all the way to the grass to the sky, is all in that world. And we did play with things. We did play with things like Luma and Runway to see could we get these shots to connect, because we did a live action plate for the feed. And it was tough. We didn't end up using any generative AI video for this, because everything just, was better served by the tools we had, at least during this year's production. But, as we go forward, who knows? And if you look at the, at how the shot was constructed, the CG piece had to basically blend in with what we shot on that plate and had to be tracked. and it ended up working out pretty well in the end in this case. But this is a bit of the the behind the scenes of that specific shot. Now, looking forward, obviously we want to do more of these, and we've got a multi-year roadmap for the archive, and it can include everything you've seen here, and of course we want to keep pushing the envelope further, but also using everything that we learned from this production to create better tools. We do service the visual effects industry and studios and content creators with things like light stage and rendering technologies, and even the stuff we use for faces is something we want to try to put into people's hands through Nuke or through video editing tools where this could be leveraged. I was talking about makeup transfer as well, and this is an example of that. So Pike, the character of Pike, who's Kirk's predecessor, has a horrible accident, gets scarred. They show one shot of that in the recent Star Trek, and we scanned in a 3D print of that makeup effect, and we're placing it on Anson Mount, the actor, in that scene that you're seeing. And it looks great. The newer work that we're doing with the faces can also do full heads in 6K. And this was a test that we'd done for the Nimoy Estate. It's showing effectively that very thing. And you get incredible detail, incredible quality. It's very consistent. In this case, it's still Larry portraying Spock, but his ears, his hair, all are replaced, not just the face. So we were testing that as well. And while I know that there's probably a little bit of a disconnecting here and there's a little latency on the audio, I want to show you guys a talking test. This was during the filming of Unification. It was a scene that didn't end up making it into the final edit, but it's Sam and Larry. If you've seen the '79 motion picture, this is from that film. It looks exactly like it, and this is a shot of Sam doing a couple lines and us testing, the face. Digital prosthetic face masks with audio and lip syncing and everything.
I think I like that, Mr. Spock. I commanded a ship named after an idea.
So I'm a little bummed that the audio is out of sync, but you get the idea. It's pretty wild. So there really isn't anything that is technically stopping us from going and doing, any Star Trek episode or movie in any timeline with actors. Now, granted, I'm all for. This was a SAG production. Sam and Larry got paid as actors. The Nimoy Estate got paid. Shatner got paid. So we had four parties getting paid for these two roles, and that's how it should be. I'd much prefer to see that be the way that things are done, especially when you're asking people to emotionally connect to these beloved characters. There's still an actor that's a custodian of that is selected by, in this case, Bill for Sam and the Nimoys for Larry. And that's something that I think is really important. So as we do more of these, I think that there's as much as AI can help us, machine learning accelerates pipelines. I think it's important to, like we filmed this in LA, we had a full production crew, we chose to film it on location outside, and I think that's a really important thing. I think there's a lot of the reaction to this, I think, the positive ones came from so much of what we did wasn't just digital. It was filming it. It was celebrating cinema. It was celebrating the production pipeline that, that frankly has been part of movie making for 100 years. But as we look at all the tech that we have now, I want to see that really just be an accelerant to make all of our creativity better, and also tastefully allow us to revisit beautiful moments or characters that we love, performed by actors that also love those very same roles. And I think that's something that we're very proud that I think we threaded that needle so far. So with that, I will stop, and if there's any questions or comments, happy to field them. Thank you.
We'll take a few questions here. We'll start over here. Thank you for such a lovely presentation, Jules. Here you go.
That was really outstanding. Thank you. Can you please just talk a little bit about your service offerings, just generally for rendering and just like a pitch about all that, just because I know that things change all the time with companies. But
sure.
Thank you.
There are two products that I guess are pretty mature, and if you go to OTOY.com, you can just download our 3D rendering software. Everything that was in 3D was rendered in our tool called Octane. It's been out for 12 years. It was the first GPU production render. It's still The quality and the speed, I think, is incredible. It is free on the Mac, it is free on the iPad, and it's $20 a month on other platforms. And it has plugins for Blender, Unreal, all of those things. The other thing we did is we rendered all of our production assets on the cloud. We have a decentralized GPU network. That was the render network credit. That is sort of built in. But yeah, OTOY.com, you'll be able to get all that. If you're interested in getting digital doubles or face scanning, we have our LightStage facility is in downtown LA in our offices. Shoot us an email at info@otoy.com, and we can arrange, a discussion for any of these things. We've been servicing, I think every Marvel movie has been scanned in by us, most of the DC TV shows, the recent Batman movie, and just tons of stuff. We've probably, over the years, scanned in almost every, a movie or TV franchise production through LightStage. What's exciting, though, is that we would hand over those 3D models to an ILM or a Weta, but now with this technology, the one that we are just adapting for this piece, the hope is that we can also give you the tools to then take that digital model or that scan and then apply that to an actor or even take a scan of makeup or hair or other things and apply that in the way that we did. So yeah, that's an extension of our existing service. But OTOY.com is probably a good place to start for anyone interested in that.
Next question. Anybody?
See a hand being raised here in the front.
All right, I'm running. I'm coming.
Thank you. Is it feasible to have a character that would, say an alien character, by using your technology for face without doing physical prosthetics?
Yes, in fact, we are working on that ourselves because we want to have Klingons and we want to animate aliens, and we have, a character from the animated series, Arex, who's a physical sculpture that we want to be able to animate with the performers. So yes, that is in the pipeline. It is much easier. The closer your target is to the 3D face you're trying to attach to it, the better, but it can be extended, and we're pushing that really, really far. We've even done tests where if you look at what was done with the Penguin, for example, we want to be able to do things like that, but also just aliens that are pretty different from their source actor. And LightStage data for Mark Ruffalo was used to do Hulk in Avengers. Obviously, it was an extension of that. So we want to automate that and make that much cheaper and simpler to do. So yes, the answer is that is in progress for next year.
Next question. Anybody? Oh, I got one in the back. Guy.
Just a quick question. Did you approach Paramount before you came up with these concepts, or did you go to them and say, we have an idea, can we collaborate right from the start, as well as with, Roddenberry and his, involvement as well?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So we started, kind of just through Roddenberry, because Roddenberry does have, Rod's an executive producer on all the Star Trek shows and the movies. The Roddenberry, and he's always had sort of these projects going, frankly, some of them going for 20 years with archiving stuff. But when the project, the archive that we were doing with him got big enough, that's when it was, we started discussions with Paramount pretty early and became an official licensee this year. And with that in place, then the scale of what we were doing in terms of even the interactive stuff, and of course these kinds of pieces of content became possible. And I will say there's a great group of folks at Paramount, including Mike Johnson, who, you saw those comic book pages I was showing that was referenced. He wrote those issues. Like, we were basing the pieces of Star Trek lore from his work, and he was an advisor all throughout the piece. So for SAG, for Shatner, for the Nimoys, and for Paramount, we had, they were there for the storyboarding. Everyone was pretty happy with the storyboards and the concept, especially since there wasn't dialogue. It was quickly approved by all parties. And from there, we just went into production, and it was fairly smooth sailing. Everybody, and that was with Paramount's full input every week on how we were going and how we were doing this. And of course, with Susan Nimoy, she wanted to see how Larry looked as older Spock. She wanted to see those storyboards. And same thing with Bill. When he decided that he wanted Sam to do this instead of him being on set and trying to be de-aged for this particular piece. Sam did a whole presentation and showed him all these things, explained it, and it was a great process. There's definitely a bigger story to tell about how this came together, It's a remarkable thing, but it was a wonderful experience, I think, for everyone, all parties.
We have another question back here.
See a couple more questions here.
Hello. Making digital humans is obviously a complex task, and you seem to do a great job at it. My question is, how do you deal with the issue of likeness? Because, this is much harder than just being able to get someone that looks like but so you can recognize totally immediately the way they behave. So this issue of likeness, hopefully you haven't responded already on that, but what can you tell us about this?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question clearly.
Digital likeness.
Yes.
And matching.
Well, I think we're up for doing anything, right? So it's like if you're trying to, in the case of Leonard, he had passed. We didn't have the ability with Bill. We did a scan. With most of the things, when there's something there that's great, as you saw in the slide that I showed when we did older Spock, we had the face cast of Leonard from the 2009 movie, and we used that as a basis to build a 3D model. And in the case of the Gary Mitchell model, Gary Lockwood being aged like 50 years, well, we just had Clay Sparks, our sculptor, sculpt that and match that. So I think if the question is, can we match anything like this? The answer is yes. As far as the rights and everything go, I think SAG did the absolute right thing by trying to negotiate as early as they did to make sure that actors don't get rolled over, because if your likeness is owned by the studio, and if your likeness gets thrown into a blender with hundreds of other actors or folks to do background characters, that can be a real problem. We scanned in 100 people in light stage, and we're very careful with how we apply royalties and how that's used. And of course, when it's a one-to-one likeness match, the talent of the actor has to have control over that. Our partner in our process is Ari Emanuel. He runs WME, IMG, Endeavor. It's very public. He's been my partner for 20 years, and the whole idea is that the talent agency can help the talent effectively own their digital likeness, use technology like this for light stage to help drive that. So hopefully I've answered the question on multiple fronts. But
we'll do one more question over here.
What is the significance of 765874?
Great question. You have to go back to the cage, that first pilot, and understand that our protagonist in 3 out of these 4 shorts, Yeoman Colt, when she goes into the future in that comic book that we based that first 20-second piece of, the first thing she says, you ask her name, rank, and serial number. She gives her serial number. It's 765874. That trip to the future is and the way back, right, is the basis for how we can sort of travel between these different eras of Star Trek. That piece, going back to that first pilot, is where the title comes from, and it's where some of the story elements, some of the seeds we planted. Hopefully we're not done doing these. There's a lot to work off of, but that's sort of where that origin comes from. And we wanted to start with the cage, and who portrays Colt, originally the plan was to do jointly, to have Laurel Goodwin, who played her in the cage, do a joint interview. And she passed away just before we started filming, and we had Robert Butler come in instead. But Yeoman Colt was a big inspiration for us building and creating all the pipelines for this, these concept videos.
Jules, I can't thank you enough. This presentation really shows why we host Production Summit. So thank you for such an in-depth presentation. Round of applause for Jules Urbach. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.